All right, so let's dive into specialty chemicals.
Okay.
I know it doesn't exactly sound like the most thrilling topic,
Right.
but trust me on this one.
Okay.
We're going to be talking about a company called Vinati Organics,
Okay.
and they are quietly becoming a major player, especially as they expand into the U.S. market.
Yeah, it's a classic example of what you might call a hidden champion.
Mm-hmm.
Vinati Organics is this Indian company that's been quietly but steadily growing.
Right.
They've carved out this niche for themselves in these really essential but often overlooked chemicals.
Okay.
They're in all sorts of things, from pharmaceuticals to agriculture.
Yeah, and they're not just surviving, they are absolutely thriving.
Yeah.
Their latest financials are out, and for the 9 months leading up to December 31st, 2024, they pulled in over 999.71 crores in revenue.
Wow.
That's some serious growth.
Yeah, that is impressive.
We've got their recent financial statements and board meeting announcements.
Okay.
And two things really jump out at us. First, their financial performance has been stellar.
Mm-hmm.
And second, they're making this big move, setting up a wholly owned subsidiary in the USA.
Exactly. And what's particularly interesting is that Vinati Organics isn't just riding some sort of wave,
Right.
They're actually creating it.
Interesting.
They've carved out this dominant position in the market for certain chemicals,
Okay.
like isobutylene-based specialty chemicals.
IBB.
Yeah, or IBB for short.
Got it.
And these are used in everything. I mean, you're talking agrochemicals to water treatment.
Wow.
And their production process is incredibly efficient, which gives them a real edge.
So they're not just making stuff, they're making it really well.
Yeah.
And in a way that's really hard to replicate.
Exactly.
Okay, so before we get into their U.S. expansion,
Okay.
there's this other interesting detail from their board meeting.
Mm-hmm.
They're revising their material subsidiaries policy.
Huh.
What's the significance of that?
Well, it seems like a smart move, especially as they're about to expand. This policy revision suggests that they're taking a more strategic, almost surgical approach to managing their subsidiaries. Okay. It's about making sure everything is aligned for smooth sailing, particularly with this new venture coming up.
Right.
It's a sign of a company that's maturing and thinking long term.
So it's like they're laying the groundwork,
Yeah.
getting all their internal systems in order before they take this big leap.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, let's dig into those financials.
All right.
What stood out to you?
Well, if you compare their third quarter of 2024 to the same period in 2023, their consolidated revenue growth is phenomenal.
Really?
And this upward trend is actually consistent across the entire 9-month period.
So it's not just a one-time bump.
No,
Sustained growth. That's impressive.
absolutely. And when you break it down,
Okay.
their revenue from operations in that third quarter alone jumped from 447.99 crores to 521.68 crores.
Wow.
That kind of increase speaks volumes about their operational efficiency
Right.
and also their ability to meet that growing demand.
It's interesting because while their revenue's going up, we also see their expenses for things like raw materials and fuel have also gone up.
That's a great observation. And it could mean that they're ramping up production to meet that increasing demand.
Yeah.
They're clearly not afraid to invest in growth.
That's a good point. It seems like they're really thinking ahead to what they might need in the future
Yeah,
and making sure that they can deliver.
exactly.
And of course, all this growth translates into profit. What's the story there?
Well, their profit after tax for the 9 months is a very healthy 287.66 crores
Okay.
on a standalone basis.
Mm-hmm.
But then their consolidated profit is even higher at 312.28 crores.
So what's the difference between standalone and consolidated figures?
So think of it this way. The standalone figures only reflect Vinati Organics,
Okay.
the parent company,
Mm-hmm.
but they also have subsidiaries.
Right.
And the consolidated figures capture the performance of the entire group,
Okay.
including their subsidiary Viral Organics, private
Gotcha. So it's like looking at the big picture,
Yeah,
the whole ecosystem of the company, not just one piece of it.
exactly. And the difference between those standalone and consolidated figures highlights the contribution of those subsidiaries to the overall success of Vinati Organics.
It's a real team effort.
It is
Okay. So Vinati Organics is in a very strong financial position.
absolutely
But as we mentioned, the big news is their expansion into the U.S. market.
right.
They're setting up a wholly owned subsidiary, which is a pretty big deal.
It is essentially a wholly owned subsidiary is a company that's completely controlled by another company,
Okay.
the parent company.
Right.
It gives them a lot of control and allows for seamless integration.
Hmm.
especially when you're talking about expanding internationally.
And they're not just testing the waters, they are going all in.
Yeah.
They've announced a planned investment of up to USD 500,000 in this subsidiary.
Wow.
That's a very clear signal of their commitment to this venture.
It definitely is, and it's a very savvy move. By setting up shop in the U.S., Vinati Organics can tap into this massive market. They can potentially reduce their transportation costs and even get around some of those tricky import duties.
Right.
They're diversifying their revenue streams and really setting themselves up for long-term growth.
It seems like a very carefully calculated move.
It does.
But setting up a subsidiary in another country can't be simple.
Right.
What are some of the hurdles they might need to overcome?
Well, you're right. It's definitely not a walk in the park.
Yeah.
They're going to need to get approvals from the Reserve Bank of India to transfer funds out of the country.
Okay.
And then on the U.S. side, they'll need to comply with regulations in the state of Delaware,
Right.
where they're incorporating navigating international regulations is complex.
Yeah.
But if they can manage to maneuver through it all,
Yeah.
the potential rewards are huge.
So it's a challenge, but one with potentially massive payoffs.
Exactly.
But what exactly will this subsidiary be doing?
So they have this twofold objective. First, they'll be manufacturing and selling Vinati Organics' existing products directly in the U.S.,
Okay.
leveraging their expertise and those established production processes.
Right.
But what's really intriguing is the second part of their plan,
All right.
exploring new opportunities in the American market.
So they're not just replicating what they're already doing.
No.
They're looking to innovate and expand their reach even further.
Exactly. It's a smart strategy.
Yeah.
It allows them to tap into their existing strengths while also being open to new possibilities and adapting to the specific needs of the U.S. market.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're really setting themselves up to be agile and responsive to this new market.
Yeah.
Which makes a lot of sense.
It does.
But I'm curious about something. We talked about how Vinati Organics dominates in these really specific niche chemicals like IBB.
Right.
Do you think that that focus could also be a risk?
Oh, that's a good question.
What if demand for those specific chemicals changes or new alternatives emerge?
Yeah, you're right. Specialization can be a double-edged sword. If the market for IBB shrinks or if there's some kind of disruption, Vinati Organics could be vulnerable.
Right.
But they seem to be aware of this.
Okay.
And their move into the U.S. with this focus on exploring new opportunities,
Yeah.
that could be a way to hedge their bets.
So they're not putting all their eggs in one basket.
Exactly. They're diversifying their portfolio,
Yeah.
not just geographically, but also in terms of their product focus.
That's a good point, and it's worth noting that Vinati Organics has a history of innovation.
They do.
They've consistently invested in research and development, and they've shown that they can adapt to these changing market dynamics.
Right.
So while there are always risks, I think they're pretty well positioned to navigate them.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so we've talked about their financial strength and their strategic move into the U.S.,
Right.
but what about the impact on the American market itself?
Okay.
How might Vinati Organics' entry shake things up a bit?
Well, the U.S. specialty chemicals market is already pretty competitive.
Yeah.
There are some major players.
Right?
But Vinati Organics brings something unique.
Okay.
Their expertise in these niche high-demand chemicals.
Yeah.
And remember, they've already proven that they can produce these chemicals very efficiently and at scale.
So they're not coming in as this unknown startup.
Right.
They're coming in with a track record and a product that's in high demand.
Exactly. And that could put some pressure on existing players who might not be as specialized or as cost-effective.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see how these established companies react.
Yeah.
Will they try to compete head-on?
Right.
Or will we see some mergers and acquisitions as companies try to consolidate their strengths?
It's almost like Vinati Organics is throwing down a challenge to the industry.
Kind of, yeah.
Adapt and innovate or get left behind.
Yeah, it could be a catalyst for change. And beyond the competition,
Yeah.
there's also the potential for collaboration and knowledge sharing.
Oh, okay.
You know, Vinati Organics might bring new technologies and processes to the U.S. market, which could actually stimulate innovation across the entire industry.
So it's not necessarily a zero-sum game.
Right.
It could be a situation where everyone steps up their game,
Yeah.
and ultimately the consumer benefits
Agree.
from better, more innovative chemical products.
That's the ideal scenario.
Yeah.
And let's not forget about the potential economic benefits.
Right.
Vinati Organics' U.S. subsidiary is going to create jobs, boost local economies, and contribute to the overall growth of the chemical sector in the U.S.
So it's a story about business, but it's also a story about people and economies.
It is.
It's fascinating how these seemingly niche companies can have such a wide-ranging impact.
Absolutely. It's a good reminder that even in industries we might not think about every day,
Right.
there are these fascinating developments happening
Yeah.
that can ripple out and touch all of our lives.
Speaking of which, let's talk about something that might seem a bit obscure,
Okay.
but could have significant consequences.
All right.
Those changes to Vinati Organics material subsidiaries policy. Oh, right. Yeah.
That we mentioned earlier. What's the deal with that?
Well, this policy revision is actually quite revealing.
Okay.
It suggests a shift in their corporate governance,
Mm-hmm.
a move towards greater centralization and control,
Okay.
which makes a lot of sense.
All right.
Given their expansion into the U.S., they're preparing for a more complex organizational structure,
Yeah.
and they need to make sure that everything is tightly integrated.
So it's not just about the subsidiary itself.
No.
It's about how they manage all their different parts,
Right.
ensuring that everyone is on the same page and working towards the same goals.
Exactly. And this attention to detail, this focus on getting their internal processes right,
Yeah.
could be a key factor in their success.
It's like they're building this really solid foundation,
Mm-hmm.
making sure everything's in place before they erect this massive new structure.
That's a great analogy. And this focus on governance could also be a way to mitigate some of those risks we talked about.
By having clear policies and procedures in place,
Mm-hmm.
they're reducing the potential for things to go wrong,
Yeah.
especially as they're expanding internationally.
It's like they're anticipating potential problems and putting safeguards in place.
Exactly.
Strategic.
They're playing the long game, and this attention to detail could be a real competitive advantage.
It's impressive to see how they're thinking ahead,
Yeah.
not just about the immediate challenges, but
Mhm.
also about the potential pitfalls down the road.
Right.
It's a reminder that success isn't just about having a good product.
Yeah.
It's also about having a strong foundation and being prepared for whatever might come your way.
Well said. And that
Yeah.
brings us to an important point.
Okay.
The potential challenges and risks associated with this expansion.
Right.
We've talked about the positive side,
Yeah.
but it's also crucial to acknowledge that there are hurdles to overcome.
Okay, let's get real for a minute.
Right?
What are some of the things that could go wrong?
Well, for starters, they'll need to adapt to a completely different regulatory environment in the U.S.
Right.
This can be really complex and time-consuming,
Yeah.
and any missteps could lead to delays or even legal issues.
So navigating that bureaucracy is a major challenge in itself.
It is. And then there's the challenge of building relationships
Okay.
with new suppliers, distributors, and customers in a completely new market.
Right.
They'll need to understand American business culture and adapt their approach,
It's almost like they're starting a new business from scratch.
in a sense,
Yeah.
but on a much larger scale.
Exactly. And then there's always the risk of unexpected economic downturns
Right.
or changes in government regulations
Yeah.
that could impact their operations.
So these external factors could throw a wrench in the works,
It could.
even if they've done everything right on their end.
Exactly. And let's not forget about the competitive landscape.
Right.
The U.S. market is fierce.
Yeah.
Vinati Organics will need to differentiate themselves.
And convince American customers to choose them over established brands.
It's not just about having a good product.
Right.
It's about marketing branding and building trust.
Exactly. They'll need to understand the specific needs and preferences of American consumers and tailor their products and messaging accordingly.
Right. It's a multifaceted challenge.
It is.
So while the potential rewards are huge, the risks are very real.
They are.
It's a calculated gamble,
Hmm.
but a gamble nonetheless.
That's a fair assessment, and that's why it's so crucial for them to have a solid plan in place
Yeah.
and to be prepared for any challenges that might arise.
It's a reminder that even the most successful companies
Mm.
face uncertainty and risk.
Mhm.
It's how they manage those risks that really determines their ultimate success.
Well said, and that brings us back to you, our listener.
Okay.
Why should you care about all of this?
Right.
What's the relevance of this seemingly obscure business move to your everyday life?
That's a good question. After all, most people don't spend their days thinking about specialty chemicals.
True, but the reality is that specialty chemicals are everywhere.
Oh, okay.
They're in the medicines, we take the food, we eat the clothes, we wear the electronics we use.
Wow.
They're essential components of countless products that we rely on every single day.
So even if we don't see them, they're there.
Yeah, they're working behind the scenes.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if Vinati Organics can bring their innovation and expertise to the U.S. market,
Mm-hmm.
it could lead to better, more affordable products for all of us.
Okay.
Their focus on efficiency and sustainability.
Yeah.
could have a positive impact on the environment as well.
So this seemingly obscure business move could actually have a very tangible impact on our lives.
Absolutely. And that's why it's worth paying attention to what's happening in the world of specialty chemicals.
Okay.
It might seem like a niche industry,
Yeah.
but it has far-reaching consequences.
It's a great example of how seemingly small developments in one part of the world can have these ripple effects that touch all of us.
Exactly.
It's about interconnectedness. Yeah.
And that's what we're all about here on the Deep Dive.
Right.
Uncovering those hidden connections and exploring the stories behind the headlines.
Indeed. And speaking of hidden connections,
Yeah.
Vinati Organics' foray into the U.S. market also raises some interesting questions
Right?
about the future of globalization and the shifting dynamics of international trade.
Okay.
You know, we're seeing this realignment of global power
Uh-huh.
with companies from emerging markets like India playing an increasingly prominent role.
It's like the old rules are being rewritten.
Yeah.
And new players are emerging on the global stage.
Exactly. And it'll be fascinating to see how this plays out in the years to come. But for now, let's bring it back to Vinati Organics.
Okay.
And their U.S. expansion.
All right.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
We have from impressive financial performance to ambitious expansion plans. We've really gotten a sense of what Vinati Organics is all about.
Right.
But I feel like we've only scratched the surface. I agree. And that brings us to our final thought for you today.
So Vinati Organics has this proven track record,
Yeah.
especially with those IBB chemicals. Do you think as they move into the U.S. market, we'll see even more like groundbreaking developments coming from them?
I think that's the really exciting part.
Yeah.
It's like opening the door to all sorts of possibilities.
Right.
Vinati Organics is known for pushing the boundaries, finding new and better ways to create these essential chemicals.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me if they leverage their expertise to develop even more specialized products, maybe tailored to the specific needs of the U.S. market.
So it's not just about bringing their existing products to a new market.
Right.
It's about using this as a springboard
Exactly.
for further innovation.
Yeah, and that innovation could take so many forms.
Right.
It could be about developing entirely new chemicals with unique properties, or it could be about finding more sustainable and efficient ways to produce the existing chemicals.
You mentioned earlier they might have to adapt their products to meet maybe stricter environmental standards in the U.S. Could that actually drive them to develop even more environmentally friendly solutions?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Navigating the U.S. regulations could be a catalyst for developing greener technologies.
Interesting.
That's a win-win-win.
Yeah.
Vinati Organics gets to expand into this new market.
Right.
Consumers benefit from more sustainable products, and the environment benefits from cleaner production processes.
It's amazing how one strategic decision can have these ripple effects that extend far beyond those immediate business goals.
Absolutely. It really highlights the interconnectedness of things.
Right.
How these seemingly isolated events can have a much broader impact.
And it reminds us that business isn't just about profit.
Right.
It's about progress, innovation, making a positive impact on the world.
Absolutely well said. And while we can analyze the data and speculate on outcomes, the future is unwritten.
Right.
It's really up to companies like Vinati Organics to make these bold moves and see where they lead.
It's exciting to think about the possibilities.
It is.
You know, the new discoveries and innovations that might emerge from this expansion. Who knows? Maybe someday we'll be back here doing a deep dive on some groundbreaking new chemical technology that originated from this very move into the U.S. market.
I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yeah.
Vinati Organics is definitely a company to watch. They're ambitious, they're innovative, and they're not afraid to take risks.
Yeah.
I have a feeling we're going to be hearing a lot more from them in the coming years.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into Vinati Organics.
It does.
We've covered their impressive financials, their ambitious expansion into the U.S., and even pondered the potential ripple effects of their move.
On the global specialty chemicals industry.
That's right.
Hopefully you, our listener, have come away with a better understanding of this often overlooked, but incredibly important sector.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It has.
And I think it underscores something crucial.
Okay.
Sometimes the most intriguing stories are hidden in plain sight.
Exactly. It's about looking beyond the headlines, digging a little deeper, uncovering the hidden connections that shape our world.
And with that, we leave you with one final thought.
Right?
As Vinati Organics sets its sights on the U.S., it really begs the question, what other hidden champions are out there, poised to make their mark on the global stage? And what impact might their innovations have on all our lives?
It's a question worth pondering.
It is.
The world is full of these fascinating stories just waiting to be uncovered. And we'll be here to explore them with you.
That's right.
Until next time, keep diving deep.
Yeah.